Welcome to the Madison Miller podcast. Tonight's guest is somebody that covers sports for Elite Sports New York. He has the Jets podcast. Geoff Magliochetti, how are you doing tonight?
Madison Miller, it's great to be here. How are you this evening?
I'm good. Okay, so let's start off with the biggest story in sports, which is Jim Crane, the owner of the Astros, and some of the players apologized this morning for the cheating scandal. What did you make of that apology? I thought it was a little bit weak, and I didn't like what Jim Crane said about having how it didn't impact the game.
Yeah, I mean, can you even call it an apology, to be honest? Because, Crane goes up and says, I don't think this impacted the game, and then literally 55 seconds later says, I'm not saying it didn't affect the game. So what are you trying to do here? Because, frankly, it was very, Larry David-esque, where, he's trying to come up with the perfect apology and flat out admits he doesn't want to apologize and does so begrudgingly. And, the players' reactions I thought were even worse because, how come they can't just, because Jose Altuve, he's talking about, trying to bring a title back, talking about how they won. And then Justin Verlander, who, he was one of the biggest advocates against sign stealing, but and yet he was the one who seemed to benefit from it. So I can even call that an apology. I think it's an embarrassing position for the team all around. It was an embarrassing display, and I really think it's a bad display from Major League Baseball as well, who hasn't suspended any of the players. They did what they did with AJ Hinch, but at the same time, the players, none of the players are being punished for what they did. I'm sure some sort of sweet deal was made, to maybe for a quote unquote reduced sentence or lack thereof entirely. I think the person who handled themselves best was, in fact, Dusty Baker, who had nothing to do with it. He, of course, is going to be the new manager in the wake of Hinch's firing. So I think that's the most ironic thing at all. He was the only one who really seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation and truly seemed remorseful for something he had no involvement in.
Yeah, exactly. Dusty Baker, I feel like, is in a tough spot though because he wasn't involved in all this, but he's going to be getting questions about it all season long, and I think that's going to be a distraction to the team, which makes me think that there's a new lurking threat to the Yankees in the American League this season. Do you still think it is the Astros, or do you think it's somebody else?
Frankly, I think the American League is the Yankees to lose. But having said that, I do expect some new contenders to rise up. As you said, I think this is going to hang around the Astros all season. And I think that, there is going to be a team in the American League West that's going to take advantage. And I think that team is going to be the Oakland A's. And I also think the Minnesota Twins are going to be angry. I think the Tampa Bay Rays are going to be a threat to the Yankees. They had got so much done on such a limited budget and, with relocation rumors coming down on them. So I really think that they're a team to watch in the AL East. I think the West actually goes to Oakland. And, I expect, of course, the Los Angeles Angels. I think they're going to contend as well. I think Joe Madden has a team in the right direction. He's the type of guy that can really unlock Mike Trout's true potential down there, make him an even better player and finally get that team on the right track, get them to fully contend. I don't expect really any changes. I do expect Houston still to get a wild card, but I think their position is going to be a bit more precarious than it has been over the past few seasons.
Yeah, I'm not high on Houston this season at all. A lot of it's because of the distractions of the cheating, and they lost Garrett Cole. I love the Athletics this year. I'm with you there. A lot of people I've talked to, Derek last night still thinks that it's Houston's division to lose the AL West. I was talking to somebody else on Twitter. He thinks that it's the Astros to lose as well, although Derek is higher on the Athletics than the other person I was speaking to, but I'm with you on the A's. I think that they have a real chance to come out of the American League West. I think that is the biggest threat to the Yankees this year in the American League as well. The Dodgers have every right to be upset with how this Astros thing has played out because 2017 World Series, that was their opponent. Who do you think is the biggest threat to them in the National League?
I think obviously you have to go with the Los Angeles Dodgers there once again. I think, they only got better. That addition, Mookie Betts, is only going to make them even more dangerous. But I have a bit of a surprise contender I'm surprised not too many people have been talking about. I'm kind of worried about the Milwaukee Brewers in terms of, teams that could contend for a World Series. I think they're a team that, they're somewhat rejuvenated with, they brought back their old retro look with the MLB gloves, so there's plenty of, excitement for that. They brought back several big names, and I think that they're going to be a team, like Ryan Braun. They signed Garcia this year as an outfielder. Lorenzo Cain is coming back. So I really think that they're a team that's, a bit of a dark horse, and I think a lot of people are counting out because of, what the Cincinnati Reds were able to do this offseason. But I think the Brewers are going to be a dark horse contender in the NL. I also want to keep an eye on, obviously you have to keep an eye on the defending champions, the Washington Nationals, but I also want to keep an eye on the Atlanta Braves, such a young team with so much raw, young potential. And I think once they learn how to win the big games, win in September, I think that they're going to be a truly dangerous team to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I'm higher on the Braves than I am on Milwaukee. I'm just not sold on Milwaukee's pitching. Braves pitching, I think, has potential. And I like the Cole Hamels ad, although he's injured right now. The Nats, I love the Nats. I feel like people are sleeping on the Nats, and everyone is writing them off a little bit because they lost Anthony Rendon. But I still think that they're going to be a good team. I think the Mets are going to be pretty good. But I don't think that those distractions are going to really be around with the Mets because Carlos Beltran was fired. So I think that the Mets will be okay. But if there's any distractions with the Mets, it's going to be the ownership situation. Phillies, I don't know about them. I think Girardi's an upgrade over Gabe Kapler. To me, the key for Philadelphia is Aaron Nola and whether he can become the guy that they need him to be. He was bad by his standards last year. He wasn't as good as he was in 2018. So I feel like Aaron Nola needs to be better if they want to contend in the National League. I think it's the Dodgers and then a gap of other teams. I'm high on the Reds. Cardinals, I think, are good. I think the Cubs are going in the wrong direction unless they somehow get Nolan Arenado. But if they do get Nolan Arenado, is Chris Bryant a part of that trade? I really don't know. So I think the Cubs are a little bit of a wild card. Not a wild card team per se in terms of a playoff pitcher, but like a wild card in terms of the season of which direction they can go. And I feel like the Brewers are in that wild card conversation as well in terms of I have no idea what's going to happen with that team. So I think the NL, I feel like, is a little bit uncertain outside of the Dodgers. Let's move on to the WNBA. There is some free agency stuff that I want to get with you. The big one that surprised me was that DeWanna Bonner got traded from the Mercury to the Sun, and 3 first-round picks went back to the Mercury, and then the Mercury turned around and pull off a trade for Skylar Diggins-Smith. That's crazy. What do you make of all that?
I make it as Phoenix is trying to end the Taurasi Griner era on the perfect note. They think they have another run or two with them with Diana Taurasi until, remember, she missed most of last season with an injury, and they're really trying to go all out and send her off on the right note. And you look at the WNBA right now, it is very, very, very top-heavy. And you look at the teams they got going right now. You have Phoenix, you have Connecticut, and you have Las Vegas. They're all teams right now that are they're packed to the brim with all-stars, and it's really set up a new era of super teams, you could say, in this new WNBA. In fact, we forget at this point that, the Washington Mystics, they just won their first title, and they brought back Elena Deladon, and they're about to bring back Emma Meesman too, the Finals MVP, I think. So I really think it's great that there's so many stars in so many places with the WNBA right now that anybody can contend right now in this league. And even look towards the bottom, Los Angeles just made a big move. The Sparks bringing in Christy Tolliver, who, of course, not only has made a name for herself on the WNBA court, but she's also made an impact on the Washington Wizards bench as an assistant coach. And that role isn't expected to change with her taking that job over out in Los Angeles. So I'm eager to see what happens with this very top-heavy WNBA moving forward. And even some of the teams that, you'd consider, on the brink of playoff contention. Remember, 8 of the 12 teams go to the playoffs in this league. But there's so many storylines toward the bottom as well. You look at Dallas. they own 4 of the 12 picks in the upcoming first round of the WNBA draft. So what are they going to do there? And this is a team that, has already was stocked with several young names and really could only continue to get better. And, you look at the local New York Liberty. They've been a little bit quiet so far. They did bring in Laisha Clarendon, and she's supposed to be a very good veteran coming off the bench. It'll be interesting to see what the Liberty do next. Bria Hartley has moved on to Phoenix as well. And Tina Charles' name has come up in trade rumors. I personally think she will stay at least one more year. She has been cored by the team, meaning she will be paid, the veteran maximum salary in the league under the new CBA agreement. This is the third and last time she has been cored, but I believe that she'll be sticking around for at least one more year because, she's had to gone through literal basketball hell in a way to get to this point. They're finally in, her de facto hometown of Brooklyn, and she grew up in Queens, came over to Brooklyn where her father had the Soul and Calypso record store, Ralston Charles. She in fact did a documentary on it that premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival last year. So I think that she'll stick around for at least one more year. And Liberty do have several of their own free agents to deal with, including Maureen Johannes, Rashonda Gray, and of course they have the top pick in the draft. And the consensus is that it'll be used on Sabrina Ionescu, the record-breaking guard out of Oregon. So it's going to be a real interesting WNBA season. I personally can't wait till May.
Yeah, it's going to be a great year. The Liberty are fascinating to me, though, because Sabrina Ionescu, do they keep Tina Charles? I was thinking about that the other day when these big trades are happening with the Mercury and the Sun. And I thought about when the Sun traded Charles to the Liberty, and I was thinking about how the Liberty are sort of getting younger. They're probably going to take Ionescu. Are they going to move on from Charles, or are they going to keep her? I'm very, very fascinated to see what they do with Charles. Another WNBA move I don't think you mentioned was the Atlanta Dream star Montgomery going to Vegas. That was a big one.
Yeah, Angel McCoughtry, she's really going to make an impact over there. She, of course, joins Liz Cambage, Asia Wilson, Kelsey Plum. So Vegas actually did lose someone today. They lost Sydney Colson, who has signed elsewhere, and I'm eager to see what happens. Oh, we also can't forget about the Chicago Sky, who actually just signed Sydney Colson and also brought back Allie Quigley and Steph Dolson. So they're a team that is still reeling from the brutal loss they took. Not brutal in terms of the score, but brutal in terms of the way it ended. They, of course, lost to Vegas in the semifinal round when Derica Hamby launched that three-pointer from half court. So I'm eager to see what the Sun do next year. Courtney Vandersloot also re-signed with the Sun, that according to Madeline Kenny of the Chicago Sun-Times. So I'm really interested to see what the Sky do next year. Going into all this, I was thinking that they were going to be my title contender or my NBA Finals champion next year, bring home the title to Chicago. But you know what? Now this is wide open. This has been such an interesting time period for the league. It's great to see it's getting some attention. They just brought in that great new CBA, and now names old and new are going to be dominating the basketball court for many summers to come, it looks like.
Yeah, I'm interested for this season as well, and we'll definitely have you on before that season starts. We could predict the season and whatnot. XFL, you covered the Guardians. What was your thought on the game and just the league in general?
Well, you know what? What's interesting about this league, people keep saying how, spring football can't work, But it seems to me that if there's one thing we can all agree on today, it's that football is king. Because people complain all the time about things like Thursday Night Football, the Pro Bowl, the NFL preseason, and the endless amount of college football bowl games. But you look at the ratings for these, and their ratings at the other three major leagues would salivate over. And, this is a good opportunity. It's perfect training ground to bring in a new league and maybe loosen the grip the NFL has on the public consciousness. And, you look back to the Alliance of American Football last year. That league didn't die because no one was watching. That league died because their money was in the exact wrong hands. And Vince McMahon this time around has taken care of that issue, selling off over $200 million of WWE stock to make sure this league can be sustainable. And what I got from the impressions during our first game on Saturday and Sunday, the Guardians, of course, playing on Sunday, topping the Tampa Bay Vipers 23-3. It's a fun, festive atmosphere. Obviously selling out MetLife Stadium, which is one of the bigger stadiums in the NFL, that probably wasn't going to happen. The goal, I've been told on several occasions, is that they're hoping to fill out the lower bowl. That didn't happen either, but over 17,000, I believe it was 17,634, watched the Guardians take over and just dominate defensively in this win. And you know what? That's the biggest edge of all. You just have to go out there and win, because New York football fans have been denied victorious football for a long, long time now. I believe the last playoff win, in fact, was Super Bowl 46 back in 2012. So, they're hungry for some contention, for some victorious football out there. And the Guardians handled that and then some, winning the game in 23-3 fashion. I think this league, it's sustainable. It has just the right amount of talent. It's just different enough from the NFL. And believe it or not, I think they're going to get some mileage as the name XFL. Like, you look at the box office, the movie box office for 2019, the top 11 highest-grossing movies and 18 of the 20 highest-grossing movies were either sequels, prequels, reboots, remakes, continuation of cinematic universes, etc. So people love football, and they love nostalgia. That's why I think this XFL is a little bit separated from other leagues. I'm eager to see what happens with it moving forward.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this league. I watched the entire Guardians game on Sunday, and I watched bits and pieces of what was the game on ESPN? Dallas St. Louis on Sunday after the Guardian game. I watched a little bit of that when I was out to dinner the other night. It was on the TV there, so I watched a little bit of that, and I watched the entire Guardians game. So I'm interested to see how this plays out. I really haven't invested in terms of betting, in terms of futures yet. I just need to see how these first couple weeks play out. Then I'll pick a team to find some value in it on a gambling future for the XFL. College hoops. You cover a little bit of Big East. The first place team, I believe, is the Seton Hall Pirates. I know they lost last night, but I think they're still in first place. How far do you think this team could realistically go?
This team could realistically, if all pans out, be a Final Four team, because, people talk about, when you talk Seton Hall basketball, everyone wants to talk about Miles Powell. And rightfully so. He's a heck of a player and is destined to do bigger and better things in the NBA. But here's the thing. The great thing about Seton Hall basketball, even leading into last night's loss against Creighton, is that they have been able to find ways to win without Miles Powell. He suffered an injury earlier in the year. The guys have stepped up to the occasion so many times that's allowed them to enter the top 10 in the AP rankings, their highest ranking in quite a long time. And they've been able to, more importantly, build a large gap, or somewhat of a large gap, in the Big East standings. With last night's loss, for example, they were able to take a loss to Creighton and still lead the conference by 2 games. And they topped Villanova last weekend. So I really think that this is a team that, really plays for each other and really knows how to win and how to get things going. Because, we've seen so many guys come up and, and rise to the occasion, pick each other up, even when things aren't going entirely their way. I mean, you want to take a look at some of the guys who have come up big. Yes, Sandro, who's done a great job. He fouled out last night, but the Georgian center has risen to the occasion so many times. I believe he had 15 points in the second half, as a matter of fact. Helped against Villanova last Saturday. Really kept pace of the game while Miles Powell was sitting on the bench with foul trouble with 4 fouls. You look at other guys on this roster. Quincy McKnight, a couple big dunks against the Wildcats. Jared Rhoden's a guy to keep an eye on, sophomore out of Baldwin, New York. These are guys. Miles Cale's another one. I really think that, Romaro Gill, he's been a dominant, experienced force in the interior, really daring guys to come in and shoot on him. So I really think that Seton Hall has not just been all Miles Powell's. The great thing about the Pirates is that they're a balanced attack led by a superstar. And it's something that, winning as a team, we've seen Villanova use to dominate the conference over the past years. Sure, they've had their share of Big East legends come in and out of that lineup, but you've seen everybody contribute to that lineup and really makes a difference. When you can collaborate as a team, it could work wonders. And I think that's something that, things have been, it's a lesson that's somewhat forgotten in the NBA, because, it's so much relies on, antics of a single superstar. But in Seton Hall, over in West Orange, over in South Orange, over in Newark, they really played together as a team, with Miles Powell really picking up the slack for that in the end, should they falter.
Yeah, Miles Powell's been very good when he's been able to stay on the court this season. I know he was hurt earlier in the year. Do you think he can realistically win the Big East Player of the Year, or do you think that's Marcus Howard's to lose?
I think Howard kind of sort of locked it up last night in the sense of becoming the Big East all-time leading scorer in that loss against Villanova. But I think that at the end of the day, what it comes down to, it's all about deciding the V in MVP. And I think that Howard has demonstrated that more. You could realistically argue that, Marquette would be at the bottom of the conference right now, if not for the antics of Howard. Seton Hall, on the other hand, as we were discussing, they've really been a nice little team effort, but it really, it really speaks volumes to the job that Kevin Willard has done, where even when Powell has been forced to bench due to foul trouble, due to injury, due to plain old inconsistency, they're still able to tread water and be one of the better teams in the not just the conference, but the nation as a whole. So it's no slight on Miles Powell at all. It just speaks volumes to how great of a team Seton Hall has all around him, and I think Howard has an inside track on him, if only because his absence would be more detrimental to his squad should he not be there.
Yeah, I think that Marcus Howard's the most valuable player of the Big East for sure. Did you see the top 16 that the committee released on Saturday afternoon for the college basketball tournament?
Yes, I did. I believe Seton Hall was a 3 seed in there.
Yes, I think they were too. What did you make of that?
I think it's interesting what the college basketball selection committee is trying to do. Add a little intrigue, show who's where at this point in time, and I think that's a fair ranking for the Pirates at this point because they've had some tough losses here and there. There was that loss to Rutgers earlier in the year that kind of has people shaking their heads a little bit. A 10-point loss to Iowa State and Ames, and of course you're going to have games last night against Creighton, and that loss against Xavier too was a bit troubling, where they fell behind 25-6 in the first half at home and never really recovered from that. So I think that's a fair place to put the Pirates right now. Granted, they can easily raise that position up to 2. I think 1 is just a little too much to ask for at this point. Just a little too much you have to rely on a lot of teams to lose if you're trying to get a 1 seed. I mean, this season has been crazy, but I don't expect that many losses. But at the same time, I think that Seton Hall could well work their way up to a 2 seed, especially if they go on to win the Big East tournament, last doing so in 2016. It would be one exception of a 5-year stretch where Villanova has taken 4 of them. So if they're able to win the Big East tournament, I could definitely see them moving up to a 2. But I think a 3 is a good place to put them at this point in time, especially considering they would immediately go on to beat the Wildcats, although that loss to Creighton might drop them down to the 4 in the eyes of some of the committee, I believe.
Yeah, I think a best case scenario for them is maybe a 2 if they win the Big East tournament, if they can avoid a couple losses down the stretch, and realistically probably a 3, worst case scenario of 4. And the top seeds on the 1 line were Gonzaga, Baylor, Kansas, and San Diego State. And that's who I think will be the 1 seeds come Selection Sunday, with the exception being I think that either Duke or Louisville will end up on the 1 line, and the loser of Kansas Baylor in the Big 12 title game, whoever goes further in the Big 12 tournament, will be a 1 seed, and whoever could loses via an upset. Let's say West Virginia upsets one of them in the Big East or Big 12 tournament. I could see one of them drop down to the 2 line. So I think that Duke and Louisville are in play for 1s. And Dayton, you can't sleep on the Dayton Flyers as well, who've been a pleasant surprise this year, led by Obi Toppin. Another surprise team this year in college basketball has been the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. What do you make of Rutgers this season, and how far do you think they can go in the tournament?
You know what? If Rutgers just somehow gets to the tournament, I think that's enough of a win for them as is right there. Because, they're more snake-bitten than the football team at this point, the men's basketball anyway. Women's basketball is another story. They've done wonderful things under Steve Vivian Stringer down there. But the men's basketball team has not made the tournament since 1991. So if you could just find yourself among the 68 on Selection Sunday, I think that's a win of itself right there. So, they've been a great story, Rutgers, this season. They've kind of fallen back to earth a little bit, but still have managed to set themselves up in decent position at 17-8, closing in on 20 wins. They nearly avoided disaster over the weekend, I believe it was, where they almost lost to an 8-win Northwestern team, but managed to take the game in overtime. So they'll have some opportunities to build some of their cred back up over the final weeks. It's a very, very, very tough schedule. They go to Illinois on Saturday. Illinois, of course, lost their top scorer. Who knows how long he'll be out. Then they got to play Michigan, Wisconsin, and end the year with Penn State, Maryland, and Purdue. So barring disaster, which would involve probably, getting a lower to middle tier seed in the Big Ten tournament and then losing their opening game, I think Rutgers should be safe. Get to 20 wins, especially against this caliber of competition, and I think you're really in business, to get perhaps a 9 seed, a 10 seed. I think they could totally avoid, the opening round date in the first 4. I think that, they could secure themselves a nice 9-10 seed. But again, I think any appearance for Rutgers in this tournament is a win on their end, and it's something they should really be proud of. It's hard not to be because this program has undergone so much turmoil, so much silliness. Mike Rice was here and accused of abusing the players. It was the Eddie Jordan era. So many saviors have come and gone. Mike Rosario was supposed to be a guy. He ended up transferring to Florida. But this ragtag group has come together and really has provided some Big Ten hope in Piscataway, which is, of course, has been at a premium primarily thanks to the failures of the football program. So I think it's a win as is if Rutgers get in there, and I expect them to see anywhere in the perhaps, let's call it 8 to 11 seeds just to be safe come Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I see them between 9 and 11. We'll see what kind of seed they get in the Big Ten tournament. If they have a good Big Ten tournament, I can see them bumping up a line or two if things go well and if they can knock off Maryland or Michigan State. The Big Ten tournament is being played where this year? At the United Center?
I believe so. They change every year. It's not like the Big East tournament, which has been held at MSG. It's in Indianapolis, actually, I believe, this year. So Indianapolis going to it's not called Conseco Fieldhouse. Bankers Life Fieldhouse. It's called over there now on the streets of Market Square. So it'll be interesting to see what Rutgers does. I think you're right. I think if they somehow end up winning the Big Ten tournament, tall task, but if they win a game here or there, really impress the voters with this final stretch, they can climb as high as 6, I believe. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, 6 could be. I think you'd have to take. Depends on who they be, like a Maryland or a Michigan State. Even though Michigan State's kind of down right now, Iowa's a good team in the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten is very good and very deep. Another surprise team there is Penn State, who I think is going to be a higher seed than Rutgers. What do you make of the Nittany Lions this year?
Another long-suffering program that I think has undergone a full year, a very good year. They recently found themselves back into the top 25. They're currently ranked 13th right now. Rutgers will face them on February the 26th. That's a Wednesday. Faced them earlier this year and won 72-61 back when Penn State was ranked 20th over at Piscataway. So I think that their team that could definitely make some noise in this tournament as well. They're a very up and down squad. They'll win 3 and then lose 3, and those 3 will come against ranked competition, and the losses will come against not so great competition. So I could see Penn State falling anywhere between a 5 and 8 seed in the tournament, maybe 7 to say just to be safe. So I think that they had the potential to make some noise there too. Definitely could. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they were a Sweet 16 team, Penn State. So I'm glad to see that they've been able to make some strides as well. Overall, the Big Ten Conference, I was watching it during the Villanova game last night. I believe Fox's bracketologist has 11 teams from the Big Ten going to the tournament. So what a great year for basketball it's been in that conference.
Yeah, if there's 11 teams going to the tournament from the Big Ten, you could just do the process of elimination of who's not going to be in the tournament, and that's Nebraska, Minnesota, and Northwestern, and everybody else is in.
Yeah, even Minnesota, I saw in Joe Lunardi's latest bracketology, he had Minnesota ranked in the first 4 out. I'm not sure I fully agree with that, but I think it's a great testament to just how dominant Big Ten basketball has been this year. So Minnesota currently sitting at 12-11. The beautiful thing about this Big Ten basketball season, anybody can beat anybody. There's no automatic wins, well, except maybe if you're playing Nebraska or Northwestern. But at the same time, every game is exciting. Every game means something. You can rise, you can fall. Either way, you better not take any nights off in the Big Ten.
Exactly. Okay. A couple more things before we go. NFL. Off season's underway. The biggest storyline in my mind is the future of Tom Brady. Do you think that he stays with the Patriots, or do you think he goes elsewhere? Maybe the Chargers or something like that? Titans?
I think he stays with the Patriots personally because, I just think both Brady and Belichick, they're too proud in a sense for their swan song, for their final New England memory together to be a listless loss to the Tennessee Titans at Gillette Stadium. They'll be back with a vengeance, I believe, next season, depending on what kind of moves they make. And Brady earlier posted on Instagram, Julian Edelman posted something kind of a seasonal wrap-up type post, and he said something along the lines of, get back to the East Coast so we can throw. So I think that he will be back. I just think that, conventional wisdom says maybe he should retire, maybe he should bow down at this point, but that doesn't seem to be, the Tom Brady or the Bill Belichick way, for that matter, in the sense that, they've had so many good memories together. They will not take losing as an answer. They won't take no as an answer. And they just both seem too stubborn, in a good way from a New England perspective, I guess, but they seem too stubborn and too belligerent to make their final memory together that loss to the Titans that just was not a good showing all around. So I believe that they're going to try to restock in more ways than one. And I think Brady will be back because going to the Chargers is an interesting conclusion. But what's interesting to me is that the Chargers have done little, if anything, to prepare for life after Phillip Rivers. That's why I have to give the Giants some props. They managed to do their due diligence. They brought in Daniel Jones during the final year of the Eli Manning era. That was pretty well done and made for a pretty smooth transition of power by week 3 of last season. So I'm eager to see what LA does in free agency too. Heck, they have a backup who I think is capable of getting you, 7 or 8 wins. Tyrod Taylor, who I thought was made to be a bit of a scapegoat over in Buffalo. He took that team to their first playoff appearance in over a decade, nearly 2 decades, and still they tried to blame him for not, being the explosive performer we've seen in so many offenses across the league. But he's a nice little fill-in option for a year. I think LA will continue to explore other options, but I believe Anthony Lynn did give a bit of a vote of confidence to Tyrod earlier this week. But I expect Brady to remain in New England at least for another 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, I think that Brady will return to the Patriots. Do I feel great about it? Not really, but I do think he'll be back in Foxborough as well. One last thing in the NFL. Do you think there's going to be any big names traded this offseason? Obviously, Cam Newton's been the one that's most talked about in terms of a guy in possible trade rumors, but do you think of anybody else that could be in trade rumors?
I certainly think that you could see somebody, perhaps Nick Foles, for example. Nick Foles, of course, signed a big deal with Jacksonville, and obviously it's going to be a big deal who's going to take on that contract. But I think that he could be someone you could see this offseason, someone who's looking to fill in a stopgap. Like if Brady does leave, maybe New England could take a flyer on him. New Orleans too has their quarterback situation to worry about vis-a-vis. They have all 3 of their guys, all 3 talented options hitting free agency this year: Drew Brees, Teddy Bridgewater, and Taysom Hill. So I also think that Andy Dalton could be traded as well. Andy Dalton, to me, proved that he has enough left in the tank. I could see him going to the Chicago Bears, perchance, as if to say to Mitchell Trubisky. The Bears could send a message to Trubisky right there, saying, okay, you're our guy, but at the same time, if you falter, we have the right guy, or we have the type of guy to replace you. So there's a name I think you should definitely keep an eye on, and Andy Dalton. I think you should keep an eye on Foles as well, provided someone is willing to take that contract.
Yeah, those are two good ones. I've heard those names. I have one that nobody really has thrown out yet. I said this to Derek last night. He kind of got a giggle because I know Derek's not a fan of this player, but Odell Beckham Jr. The come get me and the other antics, and he was complaining about Baker Mayfield. I could see a world where he demands a trade, like privately, and then they just trade him out of nowhere. Kind of like how the Giants sort of traded Odell Beckham Jr. out of nowhere after Dave Gettleman said we didn't sign him to trade him.
Yeah, it's always a show with Odell, and I could totally see that as well. And this being the Browns, everything has to be a sideshow. When the Browns fail, they fail spectacularly. So I think that I would not rule that out by any stretch of the imagination, especially because, like you said, Odell being so chummy with opposing players during the post-game handshakes. Particularly, I think it was with Tom Brady last year. He gave him a personalized pair of cleats. So I think that's certainly something to keep an eye on, and would shock me at all to see Odell move this offseason.
Yeah, that's the guy I threw out at Derek last night just for just because that was the first name that came to my mind. Okay, it was good to have you on today. We'll have you on next month before the tournament. We'll talk about hopefully we'll know the bracket by then and where Seton Hall is, and we'll talk about anything else that goes on. Maybe NFL free agency by then. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Hey, Madison, keep up the great work. Thanks for having me. Do your thing. Thank you.